Hello together. In production, it is very often the case that employees have to transfer information to another location in order, for example, to quickly identify problems and thus reduce downtimes. In today's video, we want to show you how you can solve this problem with Peakboard. Therefore, we created a direct communication between Peakboard boxes. The use case in this video should be a production line with several workstations have been set up. All workstations are equipped with a Peakboard box and should be able to send information to an overview for the responsible shift leader. How this works, we show you now.
In the background, I've already begun to build the visualization for the receiver. This is meant to represent the particular workspaces and features a traffic light display that will be colored green when everything is okay, or red when a particular workspace is experiencing an error. Additionally, the type of error should also be displayed for each affected workspace. The material flow will be displayed in these boxes, which will turn red when an error occurs. Next, I'm going to set the variables that I'm going to modify from each of the respective senders using HTTP. I'll name one variable status 1. This will display the status for workspace 1. If the status is 0, then everything is okay. If it's 1, there's an error. Additionally, I also want to display a text. This text will also be communicated from the second Peakboard box to the first using HTTP. For this, I'm going to set another variable into which the text will later be written. When setting the variables, it's important to activate Can Push Data over API. This allows us to modify variables over the Peakboard API on the Peakboard. We're going to take advantage of this access from the second Peakboard box later. After I've set up the two variables, I'm going to configure the two traffic lights for each workspace so that, as I mentioned earlier, the light is green at 0 and turns red at 1 when there's an error at a particular workspace. Then I'm going to connect the traffic light with the respective variable for its workspace. Since I'm only going to build one of the workspaces for this example, I'm going to connect them with the status 1. The text variable is going to be connected to a text box that's positioned at each workspace. Last, I'm going to set up a refresh script for my variable status, which will be executed every time that a variable changes. In this script, we're going to check what value will be shown. If the status is 0, meaning that everything is okay, the boxes should be colored green. If it's not 0, meaning that there's an error, the box should be colored red. With that, we've finished the visualization for the receiver. Now, I'm going to create the visualization for the sender, meaning the individual workspace. Here, employees should later have the ability to communicate errors at their workspace directly to the oversight visualization using a touchscreen. The advantage of HTTP in this case is that communication between a sender and a receiver occurs very rapidly. After I've created my visualization, I can get started with writing the script that will later modify the variables on the receiver's visualization. For this, I'm going to create a script that can later be called up using the function push. Additionally, two parameters should be included, one being MSN and the other a text. The parameter MSN will contain the number representing the status of the workspace, so a 0 or a 1, while the text parameter will contain an appropriate error message. Using the function peakboard.pushData, I can execute an HTTP push request. I can find this function in the script editor on the right side under Peakboard, or in the script editor's suggestions if I simply enter Peakboard period. In the editor, I am shown which parameters I need to enter for this. The first 4 entries here define the receiver, while the last 2 the target, as well as the contents. First, we have the name of the box, which is the target of the communication. After that, the username and password for the box, which are included with your box, need to be entered. Then we give the ID of the visualization into which the data should be loaded. This can be found under Settings and is unique for every visualization. The last 2 points represent the variables that should be addressed, and for the values that should be entered for these variables. I'm going to enter the variables status1 and text1 into the last 2 variables, and the various local variables of the sender visualization. So MSN, which will later modify status1, and text, which will modify text1. So that the employee knows which status is currently being shown from his or her workspace, I'm going to also put the status that's sent to the receiver, that is the text, into a text box. Now I just need to set up the scripts that will be executed when the buttons that will send the appropriate statuses to the receiver are pressed. If one of these buttons is pressed, the global script will be executed, and the appropriate parameters MSN and text will be sent along. For that, I'm going to add them into the brackets of the function. With that, we're finished with the visualization for the sender. Both can now be loaded onto Peakboard boxes. When doing this, it's important to be careful that the visualization of the receiver is loaded onto the box that is designated as the receiver of our HTTP push request in our global function. In a live test, we can see that the boxes communicate with each other very quickly, allowing important data to be transmitted to the oversight visualization in real time. Thanks very much for watching. If you liked our video, we would love it if you'd give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions about our video, or if you have any ideas for what you'd like us to cover in our next video, please simply leave us a comment.